Hey everyone, my name's Caroline Robbins. I'm a third year public relations major here at the University of Florida. I'm also a leadership minor, so I knew I had to take a communications course, and I saw interpersonal communications, and I thought it would be very interesting as well as great for my future career. As the book suggests, communication competence can be learned, so I thought that was really interesting, especially in my field. You aren't just born as either a great communicator or not. There's a lot of aspects to it that you can learn, and that's why another reason I thought it would be great to take this class, because I was hoping I could learn more about how to be a good communicator, and that would make me a better public relations practitioner as well as a leader for my leadership minor. I also found it very interesting how the book spoke about that there's no ideal way to communicate, especially in a time where social media is so prevalent and such a big part. It's not just face-to-face interactions anymore. We have text message, we have email, we have voicemail, there's social media. There's so many aspects that play into communication, and that's another reason, as far as public relations concerned, that I have to be aware of in my field, to know that there isn't an ideal way. You have to take into consideration your target audience, your goals, and along with target audience, what's the race, what's the gender, the different demographics that are involved, and that's how you choose a channel to communicate. I also thought it was really interesting, the idea how face-to-face interaction has been somewhat lost because of this idea, this rise in technology. Face-to-face interaction allows the communicator to have much more control over the receiver and how they're interpreting the message. They're able to see the nonverbal cues, their tone of voice, things that you can't see as far as technology is concerned over text messages, emails, social media. The book also talks about the idea that communication is irreversible. And so once something is said, once something's posted on the internet, there's no taking that back. So that's why it's really important to learn the idea of communication and how it's important, so that you're not to offend people, especially across different cultures or even regions. It's important to have that idea. So I thought, segueing into the difference between low context and high context culture, that was something I found really interesting reading in the book, and that I really thought could apply to, my life as far as I've seen it. North America, you are taught to be more direct, to ask those questions, and that's not considered rude, it's considered normal. Whereas in an Asian culture, which is a high context culture, that would be seen as rude. You're supposed to more or less beat around the bush instead of being so direct, whereas in North America, beating around the bush is seen as not exactly rude, but just not normal. It's not really as accepted. People like to know straight, for it to be more straightforward. So I thought the activity with the Chinese different nonverbal cues was really interesting, and I learned a lot about that. It's so cool to see how something we consider so normal as far as hand signals, to them isn't their norm. For example, the counting, that was something that stood out to me. We count 1, 2, 3, 4, and to them that's not how they do it. Theirs was extremely different, and I would never have thought that anyone would count any differently than we do, because it seems so normal, but to them that's what seemed normal, and the way we count might be different to them and strange to them. So I thought that was really cool to see. Also, the idea of tapping on the table, that was telling someone thank you for your service, whereas in America that would be seen as, oh, you're nervous, you're anxious for tapping on the table, you're not really engaged in what's happening, you're thinking somewhere else. So it's really important to have an idea of these different nonverbal communication across culture, as to not be offended or confused when someone is communicating with you. Another example of this is I did my cultural awareness assignment on Mexico, and in Mexico it's not it's considered rude to keep eye contact, to maintain eye contact, as well as it's seen as being flirtatious if you keep that eye contact, whereas in America you are told to maintain eye contact. When you go into an interview, you are told that you need to maintain eye contact. That's seen as professional, and so that's something that for me I will use in my professional day, but in another culture such as Mexico, that is not seen as normal. And it's actually not accepted there. Another thing that I noticed, I visited Florence for a study abroad program, and the book, just reading about all these different nonverbal cues, really made me think about that. And I would notice that people were staring at me and my friends, and it would make me feel really uncomfortable and almost frustrated that they just would stare and stare. And I asked my teacher in class, I said, "Is that considered rude when people stare?" And she said, "No, it's super common. It's not seen as rude at all. They're just curious and they're just interested in especially the fact that you're an American, but you shouldn't take it as being rude." So I think it's just important to take into consideration going forward that, we aren't the only, society. We aren't the only group of people that communicate. There's other areas of the world that have communication that's different than ours. So it's important to be aware of those so that you aren't offended or confused or frustrated when you go over to different countries or when you even come into contact with those individuals in your own home. So I also thought the idea of perceptual influence was really, really interesting. I just never thought about, having an order to talking about those things, bringing up those perceptions, those concerns, and making it in a way that doesn't offend another. So by having that idea of, saying, "Oh, this is the behavior, this is my first interpretation, my second interpretation," now you request for a clarification. Are they actually feeling that way? So I think having that kind of order and that structure for a way to, face those perceptions that you might be thinking, "Oh, well, me and my friend got in a fight. I haven't talked to her in days. We usually talk every day." Well, maybe she's just been busy. Maybe she's not actually mad. So to address it in that way, I think is really, really interesting, and I enjoyed reading about that in the book. Well, I've really enjoyed this course so far, and I'm excited to see how the rest of the course goes and what else I learn and how I can apply that in my daily life. Bye, guys.